I'm so sorry, guys. I had my mic muted that whole time. Anyway, what's up, everyone? Uh, I'm Noah, and I'm very stupid. um, as you can see, it's taking me a minute to get back in the swing of things. We were out of town all weekend, but here we are. Welcome to another live stream from the Midwestern Marx Institute for Marxist Theory and Political Analysis. Tonight's stream is going to be really good, I think. About a week ago, I had the honor of speaking to a brother of ours named Libre, who is right now on the ground in Gaza, and he is helping get medical supplies to doctors and med techs and stuff for the victims of this genocide that is going on against the Palestinian people. And right now, he's less than a kilometer away from where the attacks recently happened in Rafah. So I don't know if you guys are religious people. If you are, please send him your prayers. He could use them. It's a really, really scary situation over there right now. If you're not religious, your warm thoughts, that really helps too. This Libre is an amazing person, if you ask me. He managed to get over there just because he felt like he needed to help. And every time I talk to him, every single time, without fail, he asked me how my mom's doing, asked me how my son's doing, how my family's doing, all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic. He's just one of the most empathetic people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting in my life. And this interview isn't going to be the end either. We're hopefully going to be doing updates as things change, and they change rapidly right now in Gaza. So I'm hoping we get to speak to Libre quite a few times going forward from here. Before we get to that, though, we talk a little bit about the event we were at over the weekend, which was the first ever conference for the the Institute for a Free America. And I had myself, Carlos, Eddie, and Danny, we all had the honor of speaking there with our good friends Jackson Hinkle and Hazeldine of the Infrared Collective. And it could not have gone better, everybody. It was amazing being there, and an honor to be able to just add my thoughts to the night, and meet so many inspiring people that came from all over the country, and a lot of local people too, that genuinely just want to help build a better society. And just regular people that you live next to or whatever, not anything special, but that's sort of this, I don't know, the nobility of being everyday, right? That here you are, here you are, you're ready to help, right? And that was sort of the theme I noticed as I met dozens and dozens of people. I mean, I can't even keep their names straight. I met so many people over the weekend talking about how much this meant to them, that something is finally happening in America, that we're finally getting to a place where we're ready to fight back, right? The name of the event was Free America to Free Palestine. And so everything sort of kind of focused around that, right? It was, if we want, or as I said in my speech, which you can find clips on YouTube now, if we want our internationalism, our voices as we raise them against genocide to have teeth, to matter, then we need to take the fight to our ruling class, right? Because they're the ones standing in the way, not just of our families living a decent life, but of everyone in Palestine living a life at all. And so this puts us sort of in the same boat as people struggling for their freedom all around the world. One more thing I want to show you. This is really cool. One of the people we were meeting over there gave me one of these. This is pretty cool, right? He had these made for all of us, which was awesome. His name's Hassan. Very cool guy. But yeah, I don't. You guys came here to see this interview that I was fortunate enough to do with our brother Libre. So enough of me yapping, right? I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to watch the entire interview. Before we do, though, remember that we are a completely people-funded institute. We are remonetized now. So if you have super chats or anything like that, send them my way, and we will get to all of them after the interview ends. I don't want to really interrupt it and interrupt the flow to answer questions and stuff like that. But I do want to make sure I make time for your questions when it's done. So yeah, without further ado, let's get to it, huh, everybody? Here we go. So I'm here with Libre, who is actually on the ground right now in Gaza. I mean, we have a whole bunch of questions ready. I'm sure our audience is really interested in what you have to say. But before we get to all that, could you tell us maybe just a little bit about who you are and how you got to be where you are right now?
I'm Libre. I'm a Boricua poet, cultural worker, organizer, but I'm here doing logistics with an organization called GLIA. And I got connected with them because in 2022, I went to the West Bank to pick olives with an organization called Eyewitness Palestine. And through them, I was able to get connected, and there was a need for people to do logistics here on the ground to ensure that healthcare workers, medical professionals could get to and from hospitals and clinics and support the Palestinian doctors, healthcare workers, and midwives, given the genocidal reality that is taking place.
I mean, just my opinion, but that's absolutely heroic, brother. A lot of people sort of only became aware of the severity of the situation in Gaza after October 7th. But you've been there for years already, and I think it's amazing what you're doing. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about GLIA and what that organization is, what it exists to do, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, so this is my second time in occupied Palestine. First time was West Bank 2022. Now I'm here during the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. And I came through an organization called GLIA. GLIA, folks can look them up, glia.org. It's an organization that focuses on making sustainable, affordable medical tools um, in developing countries. And what does that mean? Uh, I have props. I told you I like props. Here we have a 3D printed tourniquet. It's more cost effective for a place like Gaza, where it's harder to get things in due to consistent blockade that has been happening for the last 20 years, right? So if you can make things affordable and you can make them accessible to a place that has very little access to resources, then you can do a lot more. And so GLIA is, as an organization, has this goal of making medical tools through 3D printing more accessible, and also knowledge exchange, healthcare systems, right? How can doctors, medics, midwives learn how to better provide services in other countries that are so-called developed but have subpar healthcare systems, like Canada, the U.S. Um, and so it's been in existence since 2012, but it's not until February that they started doing these medical delegations to Gaza to meet a very specific need of providing a little support for already poor infrastructure due to the genocidal reality and the fact that the Israelis have been targeting hospitals specifically while making unjustified claims that things are happening there that they have yet to prove. And so, um, yes, so GLIA is here to meet that need, along with other organizations. I'm only here with GLIA, but there are other organizations here doing similar work.
That's amazing. And I think it brings up one of the most important sort of facts of our era, which is 3D printing is this new technology that could change everything. And it's underutilized. Why? Right? Because the corporations that are in charge of everything can't make as much money if smaller companies, for instance, like GLIA or sort of any organization like that, is 3D printing what they make at a higher cost. Right? This is, I don't want to make everything about Marxism and blah blah blah, but this is our forces of production outmoding the old relations of production. This better technology makes it easier for people to get the things they need, especially in such an important industry as healthcare, and especially in people in such a desperate situation as they are in Gaza. You brought up something else though that I think is really important. We have some questions that we've compiled over the last few days. I mean, we've gotten a huge amount of questions from our audience, from the Red Pioneers and associates and colleagues and stuff in preparation for this. But before we get to all of that, I'd first like to sort of build a framework that people who maybe know the basics, but only the basics about Gaza can get a sort of better view of what's going on, how Gaza's gotten to this place, how the struggle of the Palestinian people has become so sort of intense and desperate in 2024. This is especially important today because we've recently passed the anniversary of the Nakba, right? So maybe that's a good place for us to start. Would you maybe go into a little history for us, explain what the Nakba was, and bring us from there to here?
Absolutely. Definitely encourage folks to do their own research and whatnot. But I will give it's been to be specific and to give context, right? And as a good scientific socialist, right? In 1948, the Nakba started. It's been 76 years since the Balfour Accords, in which the British handed over um, Palestine to the Zionist regime government. This was not done with the consent of the Palestinian people, uh, and so the Nakba translates to catastrophe, the Great Catastrophe. And so in 1948, 750,000 Palestinians left their homes with the impression that they would be able to come back. This is why when we see the key, right, it's a symbol of returning back home, returning back to our land, and the keys of the homes that they left behind in 1948. And through this occupation, this is when the genocide of Palestinians started, right? Because this is the ongoing genocide, and if we're going to talk about the ongoing genocide, we can look at 1948 as a soft start, right, to what would become an ongoing 76-year genocide of Palestinians all throughout occupied Palestine. And then in 67, there's the Nakba, which is the second series in which Palestinians were once again forcibly displaced. Palestinians made a choice to leave. Under genocidal violence conditions, we cannot assume or even assert that people are making a decision, right? It is very much a forced thing, and Palestinians have very much been intentionally and strategically forced from their land. And this is not something that has been hidden. If you research any of the individuals of the Zionists, they say it. They're not trying to hide anything. In fact, they even make claims that the Palestinians should resist, and that that they should not allow this to happen. Um, and it's not that they're allowing it to happen. To be very clear, right? The Palestinians have been resisting since 1948. And so we have the Nakba, we have the Naksa, uh, and so it's been 76 years since the British gave it over to the Zionists. And to be clear, the Zionist argument of Palestine being the promised land is a farce. And you just have to look into history, because the Zionists were looking at multiple places to build so called Israel, one of them being Uganda, right? So if you look up the Uganda scheme, you'll find that the Zionists in 1903 were looking at building so-called Israel in Uganda.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that they make this claim that this is their historical land, right? And a lot of my coworkers, for instance, I'm sort of looked at my job like the guy who knows about geopolitics, right? So people ask me as soon as October 7th happens, they're like, well, you guys, everybody's talking about how we need to care about this, but why does it affect me? Like, what's the point? And so I sort of put this in perspective for them by going, well, look, what if, a bunch of Canadians came down into Cleveland, right? We're all just living here, minding our own business. They push us out of our homes, right? Promise us we can come back. And then when we try, refuse that, right? And then as we're sort of fighting to try to get our homes back, they suddenly decide that, oh, this is what they owned back in the day anyway. Right? It's ridiculous. No, of course they didn't. We've been here, you know?
If we're dealing with facts, then let's deal with facts, right? They were going to build so-called Israel in Argentina. They were going to build it in parts of the U.S. They were going to build it in parts of Germany, right? So this claim to land is easily debunked. So definitely look into the Uganda scheme, because there's a need for international solidarity everywhere for the Palestinian cause against imperialism. And when I talk about the Nakba, and as a Boricua, I think about, people are like, oh, you're still a colony of the U.S. Why don't you fight back? It's like, why are you putting the blame on the people being colonized and not the colonizer? The problem is not the people being colonized. The problem is that we've normalized colonization to the point where we think it's the job of the colonized to somehow fix an issue that was not created by them, right? And that somehow we are at fault for allowing something to happen that we had little, if any, control over. And so Palestinians have been resisting since 1948. And if you want to do more research on it, you can look into groups like the PFLP, Ghassan Kanafani, Palestinian cause, not a cause for Palestinian revolutionary. And it's really important, right? Because Ghassan Kanafani touches on a very important fact, which is solidarity. And what does solidarity look like in action? And it's to say that even if you're not Palestinian, as a human, as somebody that is against imperialism, it is your duty to fight for the Palestinian cause, because in the Palestinian cause, you find your own liberation for you and your people, and you ensure that your people do not become colonized people, because we all have the same enemy. And so if you look at the Ghassan Kanafani, Leila Khalid, and other individuals, you'll find, right, that they use a framework outside of capitalism, socialism, right, to understand that we need to use a different system if we're gonna fight against the colonizers. The colonizers are going to use capitalism and imperialism. We cannot use their tools to liberate ourselves. We have to use a different framework of thinking, and we also have a national law for armed resistance, which it's literally in international law that any nation has the right to defend itself from any outside forces, any colonizers, by any means necessary, including arms, right? And so Palestinians have always had a right to resist this illegal occupation, as do Boricuas and other colonized people, the Haitians, right? And so this is very much, the Palestinian cause is an international cause. It's everybody's cause because it's happening everywhere. It just looks different based off of the geopolitical context of where you are, but it is the very same framework being used. And so we have to understand that. We have to attack the root cause of the issue, which is imperialism.
That is absolutely brilliantly said, brother. I think, and this is something we're talking about all the time at the Midwestern Marx Institute, right? When Palestine wins, we win. We have an alignment of interests as working class people here with their cause there. And that's why next weekend we're going to be speaking at this event in Dearborn, Michigan, as special guests called Free America to Free Palestine, right? The same forces that are occupying the homeland of the Palestinian people are the ones destroying our country here, right? The ones that are making our lives impossible to live. So when Palestine wins, we win. When we win, Palestine wins. People, and this is what I was sort of getting at with my coworkers, right? This is what makes it more real for people, right? If we think about, well, who are the ones actually funding this mass murder campaign? It's our own government here. And what do we know about our own government here? It's also the force that is engaged in a proxy war against Russia, that has let this country, our infrastructure completely crumble and our standard of living go down and down and down and down over the last 2 generations. But yeah, that's really well said, brother. Thank you for that. I want to sort of switch gears a little bit and look at the underlying causes of this. I think one of the things that we never really think about is the cold sort of almost inhuman calculus of why this has all happened, right? It's easy to paint things with a broad brush and sort of just stand on the side of humanity, right? Because it seems commonsensical to us, but or to say, colonialism is wrong, because it is, right? But the underlying reason for all of this devastation, this oppression, this mass murder, the need for the unipolar order to have a sort of strategic foothold in this region, both militarily and economically, undergird the entire thing, right? Our government and the ruling class that controls it is almost pathologically committed to not only supporting whatever it is the Zionist entity does, up to and including the mass slaughter of innocents and children, but empowering it to do so. So maybe this is a bit of speculation, but why do you think that is, brother? What could possibly be so important to them in this region that they would do such an inhuman, monstrous thing? Or do you think maybe it happens on a more governmental level, that our politicians are simply easily bought off by the Israel lobby, AIPAC, etc.? Or is it maybe a little from column A, a little from column B, or what?
I think imperialism has a very predictable playbook, and also just to give even more context to the first question that also helps to answer this. Gaza has been separated and specifically been under siege, separated from the rest of occupied Palestine for 20 years, right? And so it's a particular type of thing happening here. And why would something like that happen? Well, when you think about the systems that we're fighting and what they care about resources. If Palestine had nothing, they wouldn't be colonizing it. They wouldn't be strategically separating it from the rest of occupied Palestine. And so if we're thinking in the framework of the colonizer, or myself as someone that comes from the oldest colony in the world, it's your typical playbook. They literally, when they started in October bombing, I think in November, there was already real estate investment companies trying to sell beachfront property. They already had a plan in place before the siege that started in October that is, to be very clear, somebody my age, born in the 1990s, says now this is the sixth genocide that Gazans specifically lived through, right? Think about that. If you were born in the 1990s, six genocides. And to have that reality and to see how they are flattening everything, right? They want the port. That's why they have a specific law that fishermen can only go so far out into the water, and then it's considered, and then it's they're no longer protected, and they can be shot by the Israeli occupation forces. And when I was this morning, when I was near the water, you could hear the guns going. They're shooting at fishermen that are trying to make a living, right? This is normalized. It's not normal, right? It has been normalized that anything of value will either be destroyed or taken over by the colonizers to resell either to the people they are colonizing or to other nations that are partners. Also, let's be quite frank, the US is always looking for military installations in from a geopolitical standpoint to have a say in what democracy they try to push in other parts of the world. What does the US know anything about democracy? They're literally using our tax dollars to commit a genocide in Gaza instead of using our tax dollars for affordable housing, healthcare, education, more infrastructure in in the country of the U.S. Right? And so, what does that say about their priorities? They do not prioritize the quality of life of people in their own country. As a matter of fact, they would rather fund the killing and genocide of other people at the expense of a higher quality of life to the citizens of the place that the U.S. is currently on. And the U.S. is also on occupied land of indigenous people. And so, they claim democracy, but everything that they do in action is the opposite of that, right? Gazans have a right to live. They have a right to grow their olives, their oranges, their strawberries, things that they used to be able to do. And so it's actually very disgusting to see where Israelis will not, but they'll allow in their own trucks of food to sell to the Gazans at a higher rate. And instead of allowing them to grow something that they could grow all these fruits and vegetables here, but not while they're being bombed, not while they're being genocided. And so even in a genocide, Israel is trying to take advantage of and manipulate so that they can get money from both ends. And this is quite frankly one of the most inhumane things. Many people have not seen genocide, seen genocides happen, and it's a lot more disgusting than any social media post can kind of put before you. It's a consistent thing, and also it's money. The U.S. is trying to justify increasing the military budget. Whenever the U.S. economy starts to go down, pay attention, because the chances are they are likely to start a war where there was not one. We started getting involved in Taiwan again. We started making enemies with Russia again.
Because this is sort of the name of the game of capitalism, and it's how American imperialism even really takes off after World War II, was destabilizing the self-sufficiency of other countries in order to force U.S. farm exports on them, right? So pitting working people, our farmers, against their farmers, right? In order for what? The extraction of the ruling class to get a better deal. We could be self-sufficient here, they could be self-sufficient there, and we could work together towards something mutually beneficial for the people actually doing that work. Yet we have these parasites on top who sort of will stop at nothing to force a dependency on themselves. Well, they produce nothing. I mean, they're not the ones doing any farming, are they? No, of course not. So they will, and Gaza is a horrible, monstrous example of them stopping at nothing to force that dependency, right? And when people fight back and decide that no, they are not going to be dependent, that freedom and a stable, peaceful life means everything, they won't even stop at extermination. And that is terrifying. And it's one of the things that unites us all as working class people, as just regular people, because this isn't in any of our interests. But this sort of gets me to my next couple questions, which are maybe a little bit sensitive, but that's the area we're in. This is when mainstream media, will be giving a trigger warning, right? But we don't
Mhm.
really do that kind of thing here. Anyway, we're hearing about new attacks at least weekly these days, right? And we often get conflicting accounts of what's going on. The death toll of this genocide seems to have been frozen at 34,000, for example. Now, I'm sure some of that is just the nature of how information works when filtered through intelligence agencies and the media machine. But you're on the ground there right now. So, do you have any idea of just how inaccurate that is?
Like I can tell you about the experiences. So, right, part of logistics is going to UN briefings, right, that update you on all the bombings uh, and activity that happened the prior day.
Y-
Um, so, right, so the north in Jabalia, where they're doing excessive, well, it's a genocide, so everything is excessive. But where they're bombing a lot more now, right? All the way down to where we are in Rafah, uh, and so what we know, what we can say, right, is that the according to the UN, upwards of 35,300 people have been killed. Over 8,000 people have been injured. 15,000 children are unaccompanied, which means their parents have either been killed, are imprisoned, or they are somehow separated from their family. 17,000 children are not with adults to help them like meet their daily needs.
I just want to sort of take a moment and understand the gravity of that. 17,000 children in an area, not even the size of big US cities, right? Or maybe a state, rather. Um, that is horrifying. 17,000 children going without a parent there to guide them and help them grow up, to help them get food, to help them survive and meet their basic needs, right? We grow up here and our problems are, not having the money for school clothes or having to get on assistance for school lunches and things like this for our kids. Their kids' concerns are whether or not their parents are going to be there. Think about that
And
for just a minute if you're watching. Just take a minute and think about it. That is insane. And if we are not fighting our government tooth and nail to stop this, then we are allowing it to happen.
this information should definitely invoke emotions of anger, frustration. Again, we're facing issues. The way that I like to think of the U.S. is it's a first world economy with third world conditions, right? We're in no way a developed country because we can't even economically build sustainable infrastructure for the people that live in a place that has so-called all these riches, right? So we're not seeing that translate. But what I'm seeing here, what I am seeing translate, is not only that the U.S. is funding this genocide, but that there are very real impacts. There is not one person here in Gaza that has not lost someone and something. And you have to think about that. Now, 1.7 million people have been forcibly displaced, right? When we talk about Palestinians, right, in the news media outlets, they'll be like internally displaced. These are forcibly internally displaced people. These, again, we can't really say that, that Palestinians made a decision, right? They have been forced into so-called humanitarian zones that even in those humanitarian zones that are supposed to be safe places have been bombed and massacres have happened. These are things that you can look up as fact because we're talking about facts, right? And then you think about all the numbers that I just shared with you, and those are the numbers that we know, that we can say for certain. Now we can make the assumption, and we would not be wrong to say that these numbers are probably far higher because keep in mind, the people that they're trying to dig under the rubble, they have not gotten all the bodies from under the rubble in north or the middle of Gaza, right? And so there are far more people that we can assume have died, far more people that we can assume have been injured that haven't been able to make it to a hospital because ambulances are being blown up. Hospitals are becoming mass graves and graveyards, places that are supposed to be safe, that are supposed to be offering people a sense of security, have now become the main target, right? And this is injustice in any context. And we can't make a type of exception to Gaza. There is no excuse that can justify the amount of harm that has been done to these people. And this is about censoring Palestinians, right? And when you walk into a hospital and you see people missing limbs, and you walk into a hospital and you see a young child who just who from an airstrike just lost part of their leg. These are not normal things. When you see elderly people that can't get their diabetes medicine, that are having trouble breathing, that are having trouble finding food, when you see children dying because they have to eat animal feed because the Zionists are not allowing food to get in, and even the food that is getting in has an inflation rate that is not necessarily affordable to even working class Palestinians. And what does it mean to be a working class Palestinian in Gaza? It means that for the last 8 months, not only have you been being generous, probably haven't been working, and if you have, it's volunteer. A lot of the hospitals too, these doctors are doing it for free because there's no way that money can get in, and still they as doctors have a responsibility to help their people. Think about that. And even then, they're dealing with a lack of medical supplies and aid that is also not being let in by the Zionists. This is a huge issue, and nothing about it is normal. And I'm not going to pretend that it's normal.
A lot of the time when we see this on the media, right? We see pictures scrolling through social media, whatever it is. It's far away. We can sort of divorce it from our real perspective, and it's like there's an old quote from Stalin who talked about how this one death is a tragedy, 1,000 is a statistic, but that's what our brains do to sort of protect us from the magnitude of the inhumanity of such things happening. But I want everybody watching this right now to take a minute and think about what's happening where Libre is right now. Right? This is happening as we speak. These doctors are trying their best to save people with nothing, right? With no remuneration at ever. Well, we're worried about that kind of stuff, right? While children are missing limbs and have no parents. Well, hospitals are getting targeted and destroyed and bombed by these. I mean, you can't even call them anything but monsters at this point. Every disgusting, depraved thing that human beings could possibly do to each other, they are doing to the Palestinian people right now. And it's not far away, it's happening. And I think just letting that sort of like always thinking about this no matter what we're doing throughout the day, this is happening right now as we're doing it, is a good thing to think of and remember, because we can only dedicate so much time to trying our best to help. But it's still going on even when we're not able to. And I just want to, at this moment, I'm sure I'm going to be echoing everyone else at the Institute and everyone else watching this. Thank you for what you're personally doing to help, Libre, because it's heroic. It really is, brother. Like I don't want to, get corny or anything like that, but it really is heroic to just go there and say, I'm here. How can I help? That's everything.
The way that I like to think about it, I find it really hard to say that I'm a hero. I think it's our duty as revolutionaries. I think it is. I refuse to find myself on the wrong side of history. When you know something is wrong, and when you have the opportunity to do something, then you should do something about it. And and if we're gonna talk about heroes, like Palestinians have been living this again in Gaza. They've been living this for 20 years. We're simply getting a glimpse into a larger context and a larger reality of what has been happening in Gaza and what is happening also in the West Bank. Right, there's a lot of violence of the settlers as well, and so I think it's our duty as revolutionaries to not only be on the right side of history, but to understand that solidarity goes beyond words. It's really easy to be like, I support Palestine. And then that is, if that's all you do, like, it's not really enough, because the effects are tangible, which means the things that we can do should also be tangible, because we can stop this. We have to make it economically unattractive to support this genocide, which sounds crazy, but hear me out. Up until now, we have not been able to use the rationale of these are humans being killed. That has not worked. Unfortunately, under the current conditions, under imperialism and capitalism, we have to make it strategically and economically bad for anybody that is allowing this to happen. Any country that is sending military weapons, not aid to the Zionists. They are sending weapons that are killing, that are maiming people, that are traumatizing people. Like I've had to get used to hearing drones every night fly across. I've had to get used to jets, machine gun fire, bombs. Again, not normal things, but we do have to normalize them in the context in which we live, because we're here for a specific reason, and that is to show solidarity with the Palestinian people and to provide resources in a healthcare system that is under attack in a genocide, which means it's even more needed, and we have to support even more. This is the importance of the work that GLIA has been doing and other organizations has been doing. And there are also organizations that are boots on the ground that even in this genocide are making sure that community members are getting water, are getting food, are able to get some access to funds to make things a little bit more accessible. And it's not enough, but let me tell you, it is something. And we have to do tangible things. You have to be protesting and organizing. Again, at we're not mobilizing to the Palestinian people to say that they have a right to exist, and we support that right to exist because we, as working class people outside of Palestine, outside of Gaza, know what happens when colonizers get what they want. They just keep on sucking you dry and justifying it by saying they have a democracy, and that is a bold-faced lie. And we cannot depend on the morality of a U.S. government that has consistently shown that it has no human morale and that it refuses to be held accountable by the international laws that have been put into place, and has allowed Israel to do the same thing, to have exceptional treatment and a double standard that does not exist for any other country in the world. But Israel, the Zionists, get a pass for a genocide that is ongoing, that we can say happening, and we have hard evidence. Think about that. Think about the ICJ case that has been brought before the International Court. It blows my mind, right? And so we have to be very clear that there is a huge double standard, and the U.S. keeps on talking about this red line. Where are you going to draw the red line? Because what I'm looking at, the red line has been passed since 1948 and continued. This so-called red line that this Sleepy Joe talks about, what is it? Because I know for a fact over 35,000 Palestinians have been killed. People have lost their homes. Places are being flattened. There is literally a ground invasion happening right outside of these walls of where I'm talking to you. You know, because Netanyahu was very clear, with or without a ceasefire, a ground invasion is going to happen. And that is exactly what is happening. He's trying to buy himself some time. But there is very much a ground invasion happening. There are very much evacuation orders of hospitals and of areas happening as we are speaking, which is why we hear more bombs drop. We're starting to hear tanks, gunfire, and people are scared. 650,000 people that were here in Rafah, in a place that the Zionists said is a humanitarian zone, have been forced to leave and move to move further north to another so-called humanitarian zone. Rafah, to be clear to everybody watching, Rafah is the last refuge that exists in all of Gaza. It's one of the only places that has not been completely destroyed and flattened. And I've seen it with my own eyes. And I've seen pictures from Han Yunis where they found mass graves, and the whole city is flattened. This is what they want to do to Rafah, and we cannot allow that to happen, because Gazans need to be able to heal and rebuild. And so let's attack the root cause of the problem. The ceasefire is only a temporary solution. We need a long-term solution that addresses the root cause. We need to get rid of imperialism. But in the meantime, we need to end all Israeli violence, all Israeli Zionist military of Gaza. We need to open all the borders, and we need to help rebuild on the Palestinian terms, on the people of Gaza's terms, and then we'll be in a position to sit with what has happened, what other governments have allowed to happen despite their people going out into the streets. I'm not saying that people are bad, right? We're seeing protests happen all over the world. And here in Gaza, just to be clear, for anyone at an encampment, anybody that is on the streets protesting, Palestinians are talking about it, and they're getting hope from that. So please do not be discouraged, because I have heard with my own ears, and I have had conversations about how it has brought hope in a situation that seems hopeless. But Gazans are hard people. They're tough people, and they will continue, right? But they too need a break. They need to breathe, and sometimes that hope comes from outside. And we need to continue as revolutionaries, as working class people, as people that care about humanity and understand that a genocide is not acceptable. We need to be out into the streets and demand that our governments reflect our views. Because guess what? We are paying taxes to those governments and their opinion in how those funds are used. And we should have a say. And what we want is done. And if we're going to send any aid, it should be to the rebuilding, to Palestinians to rebuild Gaza, right? Send $3.8 billion to allowing life to continue in Gaza, not to destroy it.
That's really, really, really well said, brother. And it ties this joke of telling us this is democracy back into it, right? What democracy do we have when young people all over the country are standing up and siding against genocide? And what do? They try to change the laws so that this statement becomes anti-Semitism and bigotry in the eyes of the law, which is absolutely absurd. Everybody watching, you've seen this entire interview so far, all 47 minutes of it, or wherever we're at once it's edited. There hasn't been a single bigoted thing said, right? But this is what they try to do, is tell us that, oh, there's some reason we shouldn't be doing this. That isn't democracy. That isn't the will of the people being fulfilled. The will of the people is very clear. No Americans stand on the side of genocide. None of our working class does. The idea that we would is insane. Most people in general don't, right? Yet they tell us this is democracy, blah, 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 right? And then you get the excuses, right? Like, oh, well, there's only so much our government can do, and it has this bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, but Genocide Joe could end this with a phone call. If we had a democracy, that is precisely what he could be doing. He could be saying, hello, Netanyahu. Yeah, it's Biden. Stop. And when they say no, Biden says, what? Do you want war with the United States? No, then you stop. But do they do that? No, of course not. Because the genocide is in their interest. So like Libre was just saying, making this economically unviable for them is the way to go. And that is why we say that we must free America to free Palestine, right? Because our enemy, the enemy of the Palestinian people, is in Washington, D.C. as well, right? It's not just in so-called Tel Aviv. It is in Washington, D.C., and that is our enemy. That brings up something I wanted to talk about anyway. The forces that are actively fighting against the Zionists. I'm not really sure how much you're able to see or to say or anything. So let me know if there's anything you can't really comment on. But we're told constantly in the mainstream media all kinds of reasons to dismiss or side against those actively struggling against the Zionist entity. But what do the people of Palestine think of them, right? What do regular people on the ground think of those fighting against the occupation?
I think, to be clear, resistance is justified under international law. We should get off of our high horses and stop trying to pretend that we are living the reality of people here in Gaza. The only reason that Gaza has not been overtaken right now is because there is resistance to Zionism, and there are groups resisting the Zionist forces. Keep in mind, this is not a war. This is a genocide. Meaning what? Only one side gets funding. Only one side has a formal military. Only one side is recognized or validated. The Palestinian resistance very much plays a huge role. Too much about it because these things don't happen where we are, right? Which also debunks in any type of claims that the Zionists will make. When we're at the hospitals, the doctors are helping people that are being harmed or people that need your basic care, right? And we know that resistance is happening. I don't think it's anyone's role, nor are Palestinians asking for inputs on how they resist to Zionist violence. Because what we have to be clear on is a response to violence is self-defense. It's not violence. We cannot say that Palestinians are violent people because they don't want to be colonized and they don't want to allow people to blow up their cities and flatten them. We can't tell Palestinians, right, about how to resist or what we think is good. It's simply an opinion, and quite frankly, it's not being asked for, right? Gaza, again, the only reason why Gaza is still Gaza and here today is because resistance forces, which, to be clear, under international law, is allowed. And to be clear, under international law, genocide is illegal. It is not, you're not supposed to be doing it. One side is the aggressor, and the other side is responding to that aggression in the way that they see fit. And so, again, I think people should reserve any of their opinions about any resistance that is happening, because we have a responsibility to support the Palestinian cause, right? And if we want to be in solidarity with it, that means we want this to end.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, brother. I think it's very easy to sit here in judgment when there aren't bombs coming down on your house. And I think that people often allow themselves to get sort of led around by the nose by the mainstream media, which tells them a certain version of events and actively seeks out certain emotional responses based on the language they use to describe this, based on what they omit, right? But whenever I come across people who feel this way, who judge the way people are fighting for their freedom, it reminds me of what I was talking about earlier. Well, what would you do, right? What would you do if people from Canada or wherever came and took your house, murdered your whole family, and sold you the food that you used to get back to you at a rate you can't even afford? They own all the businesses now. You have to go work for them. By the way, they poison your water. Your children are malnourished because of them. What would you do? Would you fight? And this gets people thinking. It's gotten coworkers that I know that were completely ignorant on Palestine and just kind of parroting mainstream media to begin thinking about it in a new light. So if anyone watching has any relatives or coworkers or anything like this, try to put them in the shoes of their brothers and sisters in Palestine. It's that simple. But
and to add on to that, and just okay. So Amilcar Cabral said, "You measure a people's potential for liberation based on how different their culture is from their oppressors." Let that sit in. Because what I've been able to witness here in Gaza is that even despite a genocide, I see a hospitable people. I get greeted in the morning by children that have seen probably more traumatic things than I've seen during my time here. These are children that, like their parents, were born into genocide and occupation. I'm seeing hope. Right? These are not people that want war. These are not these are people that want peace, right? And we have to understand, our colonizers are fighting for more war. People are resisting to stop war so that they can have peace and rebuild their countries. And we can, and when people are like, "Oh, you don't be violent," stop being utopic. We don't live in the conditions where we can say, "Oh, well, I wouldn't be violent if that was happening to me." The reality is, that's not your reality. The lived conditions here in Gaza necessitate resistance, and we cannot be utopic and say, "Oh, I wish they could just have talks and resolve everything." One side is unwilling to talk, and let me tell you, it's not the Palestinians.
Well, they act as if the Palestinians haven't tried that.
Yes, and they've even made some concessions, right? in order to stop things. Even after the Rafah border crossing was invaded and taken over on May 6th, breaking the David Accords, right? So-called Israel has with Egypt. Even then, they were willing to bargain. Just to be clear, Palestinians have thousands of political prisoners that are not being released and haven't been released. Don't make this. Let's not be exceptionalist. Let's not be utopic. We cannot expect Palestinians to continue to allow imperialists, right? Che Guevara said, don't give them even 1 inch. Don't give them 1 inch, because if you give them the inch, they're going to take your land. They're going to say it's theirs. They're going to rewrite your history, and they're going to try to write you out of it, which is what the Zionists have been trying to do here in Palestine. And the Gazans refuse. And you know, I kind of make a joke because I like to cook, right? Everything in Gaza is strong. I was cutting an onion and I was crying more than when I cried cutting an onion in the US or in Borinquen. Everything here is strong. And the people to stay, they want to live in peace. And it is what they deserve.
Absolutely. Well said, brother. It's amazing to me and absurd that anyone would think Americans wouldn't be doing the exact same thing if they were in their shoes. Anyway, I want to be respectful of your time, but we've had a metric ton of questions from friends and colleagues of the Institute, from our Red Pioneers, and even just from the general audience. Would you mind answering a few of these?
Absolutely. And this is not the end. As long as the genocide continues, we will be continuing to share information. We'll hyperlink information to 2 groups that you all. I can guarantee you that these are 2 groups. One supports medical, that's GLIA, and another Ella Inak is a group doing on the ground water distributions and food distributions. I was with them this morning, right, distributing 25,000 to communities that otherwise wouldn't be getting access to clean, drinkable water.
That's amazing. And we're going to have all the information for anyone who will be able to help. We're going to have all the information plastered all over this video. It's going to be in all the comments. We're going to make sure anyone who can help and wants to is able to get money or whatever else to these organizations. So thank you for mentioning them, by the way, Libre. We should continually mention them. And I also want to point out that hopefully Libre and I are going to be doing an ongoing series on this. As things change, we're going to be hopefully speaking live on the ground and continually getting updates, because the more we know, the more effective we are at resisting. Now, to get to the questions, this one is from Paper Wind on our Discord. What do you think are the most effective actions that citizens in the Western countries whose governments are funding the genocide of Gaza can undertake to support the Palestinian people?
We have seen very strategic BDS movements, and what we've seen since October 7th is, I would argue, a more way of resisting our governments and trying to force them to listen to us, right? When people see that they are more powerful than a few people that they think are the only ones that can make decisions, we have the conditions for something that we might call revolution or a movement, right? And Gaza is very much igniting this flame in the world that was not there before. People are very much becoming a lot more emboldened. They're wanting to do things. And so BDS is a great movement. And again, something that I have talked about with Palestinians here, that is having economic impacts, forcing companies and corporations to make decisions that they would not if it did not happen, again, let's study history. South Africa only happened because it was economically unsustainable for them to continue doing what they were doing in South Africa. We, the working class people, I can 100% guarantee you, right? Fred Hampton talks about this all the time. And my elder, Oscar Lopez, talks about this, right? We as the international proletariat, we far outnumber presidents, military generals, right? We are the workers, right? We are making things move in our country, even though they're not moving as efficiently as they could because we're choosing to invest in genocide, right? And so we have to force a decision to be made in our favor for the people of Palestine that also mutually benefits the working class in general. Unions need to be stronger. If the way that you get stronger is by starting to organize for Gaza, like they're doing in California right now, then do it. We have to use any and all means, because let me tell you, these imperialists are not asking, "Oh, is this morally okay?" There is no moral conscience to a lot of these governments, and the ones that do probably have sanctions on them. Cuba, right? Iran, Yemen, tangible things that are being done by governments and people of those countries that support, right, the right of Palestinians, not just in name, but in action, right? And so we have to be aware of these things, and we into the streets. And I know people are tired, and people are like, I don't think it's making a difference. It is making a difference. It is making a huge difference, and we need you all to continue, because Palestinians are asking for us to do it more, to amplify the things that we are doing, right? And so yes, organize with an organization. Join an organization if you're not part of one, because if you're not part of an organization, you're not in a long-term strategic group that can push imperialism out to make space for something that centers people and our rights, right?
I think if the Palestinian people are asking us to do something, and it's something as simple as going to the protests that are already existing, how can we say no to that? Right? I think we often look at protests because there's no sort of direct response from the people we're protesting, as if they're not good enough or aren't working. But you're hearing it right now. The Palestinian people take hope from the fact that we are resisting our government doing this. And that means everything. And so I personally would say that I don't know. I'm gonna ramble with this one, so I don't want to get like sort of carried away. But again, that's just the least we can do, and if it means that much, how do we not continue until the job is done?
Yes, and just to be clear, it's protesting, but understand protesting is just a momentary thing, and we're trying to build movements, and so there are organizations building movements to commit to more long-term work, because this is not this is something that has been happening for 76 years, and it's not gonna going out into the streets and mobilizing right now is not gonna end what is happening. It is a step towards a long-term process of ending what is happening. But it is very much creating hope in people. So in Palestinians.
That's a giant deal, and I don't think we think about that kind of thing enough. Here's another question. This one's from Rev of RTSG. He says Western media claims that Hamas uses hospitals as barracks for troops in order to justify their bombing campaigns. What is the truth from the perspective of someone who actually works with these hospitals?
The U.S. is gonna try to justify anything that it does, and so they'll use any excuse. And the Israelis follow suit, right? They also are trying to create a propaganda campaign But what I can say is there has been no proof of these claims that are being made. But it is being used as a scare tactic to justify these things. Now, what do we know? We know that the hospitals um, have have mass graves outside of them. We know this for a fact. That uh, people, men, women, and children who have their hands zip tied behind their back. Only some of them are identifiable. Others have been ran over by tanks, and so they're not identifiable. Others have been dismembered. There's proof that they've been tortured, and then those are things that we do know happened. So based what we can say that has happened for fact, we do know that there are massacres happening, that there's a genocide happening, that hospitals are being targeted, uh, and um, and that Palestinians are continuously being forcibly displaced. At this point, Palestinians are carrying their homes on their back because the only material things that they have left from their homes are things that they can carry with them. And that is, think about that, right? If the only thing that you have of home are memories, if the only thing that you have of home is what you could carry while your community was being bombed and you had to get out of there, that's a sad reality. And you've had to do that multiple times. Think about that. We cannot censor the arguments or the propaganda of our enemies. We need to focus and we need to censor the Palestinians and what they are saying. Because let me tell you, a lot of the facts and a lot of the reports are backing up what the Palestinians are saying. The same cannot be said for the Zionists. And that is why they're being taken before the ICJ. Because we can prove that a genocide is happening, that it has continued to happen since 1948, and October 7th is just a continuation of them trying to exterminate and get Palestinians out. So Oscar Lopez, my mentor, he had this painting of Pedro Albizu Campos, one of our independence fighters in Borinquen, um, and he had a quote on it, and it's stuck with me from the moment that I read it, and he gave me context. Um, Ellos quieren la jaula sin los pájaros. They want the cage without the birds. They want the country without the people. This is what the U.S. wants to do in Borinquen and its other colonies. Um, and this is exactly what the Zionists are trying to do to the Palestinians. And there's this legitimate fear of Palestinians. Not only have they been forcibly displaced, but given the opportunity to leave, again, and let me reframe that. Given the ultimatum of die or leave is a hard decision to make. And let that sit in, because what you're asking is people to trust a Zionist military that wants to displace them, to let them back in, to go back to their homes. And they don't trust them. So, because they don't know if they're going to be able to get back to their homes.
Again, I can't help but just take a step back and think about that reality for just a minute. Never knowing, at first being forced to choose between your home, which is everything to everyone, and dying. That's a hard choice to make. And then second, if you choose living, never knowing if you're going to see that again. I want to get to our next question. This one is from one of our supporters on Discord again, named Stalin's Mustache, which is a fantastic name, by the way. And this is one I'm going to echo as well, because he's absolutely right in this quick analysis. Anyway, the question is very simply, how do you keep your strength with everything going on around you?
Um, Again, I'm coming into something that has been happening for 20 years. I come from a place that is still colonized. I come from the oldest colony in the world. So I know a thing or two about what's happening because they were experimenting with my country to do exactly what they're doing in Palestine and other countries. So I want people to fight for my country and for our rights to exist. And I have to do the same for the Palestinians. So the way that I'm able to continue is it's not about me. It's never about a singular person. It is about the people, right? And right now we're talking about the Palestinian people. So I cannot try to censor myself because that's selfish. People are living through a genocide and need help. And it is the most basic things. Children are crying because they want bread. Children and adults are having to walk uh, kilometers upon kilometers with no water to get medical help at a hospital that may or may not have what they need and may or may not, if it hasn't already become a grave site. That is a reality with if I know that I have an opportunity. So Palestine must be centered in any and everything that we do, and it's not about me. And so my hope is seeing the Palestinian people continue to be here. Like my shirt says, "We're still here." Right? This is a documentary that was done um, about Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria hit, and how our people started to rebuild their own communities because the U.S. denied us any type of aid because they claimed that we owe them, So they can't help us rebuild after we lost at least 5,000 people, and homes were decimated, and infrastructure was gone. The U.S. refused to help us. So I'm here in Gaza because I'm seeing people lose everything and still find a reason to fight. I'm seeing children greet me in the morning saying, "Hello, how are you?" and laughing and smiling. And it's in those moments where you realize even in genocide you can find humanity. And these people that are carrying their homes on their back, they have histories that they want to share with the world if they allow them to. If we allow these people to heal, we can learn so much from what the Gazans have been subjected to that we can make the world a better place. And we have to be hopeful because again, I'm not utopic, I'm realistic. Reality is people are dying every day. I don't know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow, and that's just a reality. But I do know that if I had an opportunity to help people, that I would want someone to come help me. And so I am here in solidarity, tangible solidarity with the Palestinian people, because I take on their flag and I take on their cause and I give them my flag and my cause because we have the common enemy of imperialism. And so I find hope in anything that is living and alive, and the birds that are flying. Just simple things you begin to appreciate when you see a genocide happening before your very eyes. A children's smile is priceless. In that moment, they forget everything that has happened before. And just for a moment, they remember that there is another possibility for a better future. And part of that is us being here right now to help support them and a poor infrastructure due to blockades, 20 years of blockades, this current genocide that's happening, and this Zionist military violence. There's there's so many reasons to be hopeful, and you just have to look for them. Even in the darkest places, you can find a reason to keep on moving. And Gazans have shown me this. And you're trying to encourage me, and you're sad that I'm seeing this with my own eyes, and you're feeling sad that I'm being traumatized. I'm sad that you have to live in that reality, and I'm sad that that governments are not reflective of humanity to stop something like this from happening and continuing to happen in anywhere that it's happening.
I could not agree more, brother. That's amazing to hear. Um, here's another question. This one's from our brother Chen from RTSG. He asks, which country do you think has provided the most assistance to the people of Gaza? And this is one I actually had prepared myself because it's somewhat hard to tell from all the misinformation we get in mainstream media here in the States, you know. But what do you see on the ground? Is it Iran? Is it Syria? Like who is providing the most assistance? I know, I mean, all over the Arabic world is helping, but what would you say is the most?
In terms of Arab nations, uh, there are countries that are in solidarity with the Palestinian people. It is not all the countries, unfortunately. Um, but what we do see, even in countries whose governments don't support the Palestinian cause and Gaza, that people are out in the streets. And so we can kind of be scientific and maybe make some assumptions that Gaza is going to be a unifying factor uh, for uh, for Arab nations because the people are going to take on the task of unifying and correcting historical errors. Um, and in terms of who tangibly has been supporting, we know that Yemen has done a lot for Palestine, Yemen, Iran, Libya, the countries that are sanctioned. If you want to know who supports Palestine, look at sanctioned countries because chances are it's
Right.
because of Palestine. Um, and so, yeah, but in terms of seeing with my own eyes, which country nation is supporting the most, I'm not really sure. So speak on
Well,
that.
yeah, that's all right. I think I think that was a good answer. Um, let's move on to the next one. I sort of collated them. We got so many. Uh, everybody wanted to ask something, but Sebastian, who's one of the managers of our production team, he had a really good question. He asks if there's anything that you could tell the people here that only watch mainstream media and perhaps don't see the images coming out of Gaza that we do, what would it be?
Stop believing what you're hearing. Like, think critically. We have to start thinking for ourselves. We live in a society that is going to use propaganda. Malcolm X talked about this. The media outlets will have you thinking that that your friend is your enemy and your enemy is your friend. The U.S. government has no intention of supporting the people of the United States. It ignores the rights of people that it itself has created. And so, what does that say about the moral character of that nation? We can't we can't expect the mainstream media outlets to be a voice of the people if the government itself is not a voice of the people and reflective of that country. So, question, always question, and I think that is our due diligence in any and every information, even if we agree with it. Fact check.
I think that it's uh we're in an era where nobody trusts the mainstream media in the US, right? In an abstract way. We can go to anybody and be like, do you trust the mainstream media? They'll say no. But then when it comes down to an actual story and narrative being propagated by that media machine, they just believe it. And you're like, well, what happened to that abstract skepticism, you know?
You know, I gotta say, the reality is, even though we know this to be the reality, it's really hard to find alternative narratives in English.
Mm,
Again, I gave the example a little bit earlier. Al Jazeera English is different than Al Jazeera in Arabic,
yeah.
and I find Al Jazeera in Arabic far more informative than I do Al Jazeera in English, and that's and so things get lost in translation or they don't get translated.
What would you say to people in countries like ours who see the genocide in Gaza as another war halfway around the world that they don't have time to care about?
This war is the reason why you don't have time to care about other things. because governments are prioritizing messing up and destabilizing other countries rather than you. And so I'm not saying everybody has to be out in the streets protesting. Everybody has a role in revolution. Everyone has a role in organizing. If you love to cook, then you can cook for the people, right? Because we need that. If you're a medic, well, we're out here right now providing medical services to people that need it. Logistics, making sure people are getting there safe, right? And so everyone has a role.
Another question from our Discord this time. Alaskan Lambridge asks, how do you foresee the region developing once the Zionist entity is gone? For example, what will become of the Arab states that supported the Zionists? He ends this by saying, "My God bless you, and I pray for your safety."
That's so hard to try to think through. That's a good question. I think the Arab nations themselves will figure out what happens because again, the reality is when Zionism ceases to exist, there will be totally different conditions than there are right now. And it would be far more favorable. I would make the argument that it would be far more favorable for working class positions and views. And it will allow nations to develop as they should. I think, for example, about 1970, when they had their revolution, right? They were part of the revolution, and then the U.S. stopped that, and then they pushed that country back developmentally, right, for decades, and they're still recovering from that. And so, when Zionism falls, the Arab nation, the people will, based off of where they are, make the conditions for working class people to be able to have access to their rights. Based off of the place that they're organizing in order to help the working class people of their countries in favor of and against, in favor of the people against imperialism. And we have to understand that the only development that is sustainable long term is anti-imperialist development towards socialism that hopefully leads towards communism.
That was beautifully said, brother. There were a lot more questions, but I know you have limited time there. You're doing is just the most important work you could be doing. So I'd like to end these questions with one that came up just over and over and over as people sent their questions in. What do you think are the most effective actions that citizens in Western countries like the US, whose governments are funding this genocide, can take in order to not just say that they support the Palestinian people, but to give meaning to that support? Or much more simply, just easily said, what can we do to help, brother?
I will reiterate that everyone has a role. Whatever you like to do, there's a place for it in what needs to be done to correct this historical wrong. That is the reality of Gaza and Palestine, and what is happening here in this genocide happening here in Palestine. Again, people need to join organizations. People need to read and educate to have an understanding of alternatives outside of capitalism. People need to question a lot more. People need to be protesting. People need to take care of their mental health and understand that a genocide is happening over here and over there, right? There is also a reality and a necessity to overcome a common enemy that is doing quite different things, right? But it is the same enemy. And so there is a necessity to protest, to divest, to be out in the streets, but also in the books. You can cook, but also be conscious, right? We have to be aware of the multi-pronged approach, right? Imperialism doesn't use one tactic, it uses many. Therefore, anything that would be able to overcome it would have to be a multi-pronged approach that comes from different angles. So find out what you're passionate about, and then do that thing. Right? I love writing poetry. I've shared my poems, and it distracts people for a little bit, and I'll write more poems, right? Because there's a role for art in revolution. I've done mental health, so understanding that distracting these children, even for a moment, is something that helps long term, though it's not a solution. It's helpful because eventually the conditions will be there for a more long term solution. Right? What we're doing is very much a band aid, to be clear, but it is a necessary one given the current condition. The siege that is happening is a grave injustice um, to the world, and so we have to be on the right side. And also, um, something that people could do is just stop spreading ignorance and please do research. Many Jews have been outspoken about the genocide happening and that it's not justifiable and that their holy scriptures does not justify what is being done to Palestinians. This is not a religious issue. This is an ideological issue. Zionism preaches Jewish supremacy, right? We can think of the equivalent of white supremacy, saying that one thing is more supreme than, and that is an issue, and we cannot stand for that. And Jews don't stand for that, but they don't get the platform to share it because they want to make this about how evil these people being genocided are, and that's quite frankly just not true. So, like like we have to continue to understand these narratives. I'll say it again: solidarity goes beyond words. Something you can do to help. Find out what it is, and we will continue doing what we're doing here with GLIA and bringing in emergency medical teams. Right, as I'm a proud Boricua, so I have to do this for my people. Like we carry our flag everywhere that we go, right? Because one of my elders shared with me, as Boricuas, we give people our flag and our struggle, and we take on the other country's flag and their struggle. This is an international issue. This is an international cause, and therefore, everyone must be on the right side of history in supporting the end of this genocide, and ensuring that these Palestinians can get these services, and that we open up these borders so that we don't have to worry about whether or not fuel can get in, because that's something I didn't even touch on. Fuel is being quite limited, and hospitals run on fuel, and so do the trucks that are taking water and aid, and so there's so many things change, but again, imperialism, the main issue, and the Zionist violence that is taking place, this unprecedented violence, needs to stop, and there is something that you can do about it. Stop saying, "Oh, there's nothing we can do." I'm watching a genocide happen. I'm living through with these Palestinians. There's genocide that is happening. I can tell you for certain there is something you can fucking do about it, and you have to stop being discouraged.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. And for anyone interested who isn't involved yet, who wants to get involved here in the States, get a hold of us. We will get you in contact with someone in your area that can get you involved so you can help. I promise you, if you want to help, people need help in every single organization involved in this, and they will not turn it down.
Absolutely, and just to be clear, this again is an international issue. Pan-Africanism supports, right, the ending of Zionism. So we must fight, and we must use in the context of where we are to fight against Zionism and this occupation and this genocide that we know is happening. And so everywhere we are organizing, everywhere we must be fighting. And again, the Palestinian cause is not a cause for Palestinians alone, but for all revolutionaries. and if you want to be on the right side of history, and if you want to dare call yourself a revolutionary, then you must study ideology, but also understand that thoughts alone do nothing. Thoughts and actions together create change. So we must do both of those things. If we support Palestine, then we're not just supporting in theory, we are doing tangible things to support the Palestinians and the Palestinian cause and their right to resistance. Filiberto Ojedas Rios, like Ghassan Kanafani, justifiably said that under international law, we have a right to resistance. And we must allow that to be the case for Palestinians, and they just want to live in peace and grow their olives and eat their watermelons. And we must allow them the space to rebuild and heal after so much has been done to their people over 76 years, and after so much has been done to Gaza these last 20 years.
Well said, brother. You know, it reminds me of something my dad used to say. He used to say, activism without theory is pointless and wrong, and can easily help your enemy. But theory without activism is a book club. So yeah. Well, listen, brother. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. It's been an honor speaking with you today and getting to know you a little bit, right? I know you've been friends with and colleagues with Danny in the past, but we'd never met. So it's really been a pleasure and an honor getting to know you and talking to you. Before we end this interview, though, is there anything at all else that you want to say? Anything you want to get out there to people?
There's a saying in my country, and it's "Palante, siempre palante." Forward, forever forward, and I think it's really important that this is a call to all low class, working class people, of which all of us are. Because I guarantee you, somebody that isn't oppressed is not watching this. Um, uh, that uh, that that again, uh, we have we have this duty, we have this calling, um, but in all that we do, even if we mess up, like if we fall forward because we have to be moving forward. Again, we're still here, right? Gazans are not going anywhere, and in order for them to continue to have hope in humanity, we have to continue um, uh, our duty um, as oppressed people and people that know this is wrong to support. And we're not trying to put a band aid on this, right? If somebody is shot, you're not going to put a band aid over it. You're going to heal, you're gonna get rid of the bullet, and you're going to make sure they're allowed to heal. We have to stop this Israeli violence, right? We can't pretend that a ceasefire is going to solve all the issues that have been caused because of this genocide. Understand that the Gazans need not only for this military occupation to stop, for the ground invasion of Rafah to stop. It needs to stop because it is happening. I can tell you for certain it is happening. I'm hearing and I'm seeing it happening. It needs to stop. And we need to allow the people of Gaza, and with all their strength and with all the things that they have, to be able to heal and to be able to enjoy their family that they have left, and to be able to rebuild the homes that were viciously taken from them, and allow people to mourn the loss of everything that they've lost up to now and that they will lose until this stops.
I think that's a great way to end it, brother. That was really moving, specifically for me. I want to thank you for talking to us and for everything you're doing. You're representing the best of people over here, and that means a lot to us. So thank you for that. And for everybody watching, this isn't going to be the last time we speak with Libre. You'll be seeing him again, and we'll leave it there. Have a great rest of your day.
Peace.
I'm so sorry. That's the second time I've done that. Well, what'd you guys think? He's definitely an amazing person, and you can tell that everything he does it from the heart, and he does it on behalf of humanity, and I think that's really important. I was getting a few updates while the interview was playing. What amounts to an invasion of Rafah is going on as we speak, and there's a bombing going on right now. And so I hope Libre is able to stay safe. Everyone he's with is able to stay safe. And yeah, if you guys have some questions, I'm happy to answer, but I think we might just leave it there for the night. I think that I don't want to mess up the gravity and the gravitas of that interview with me, goofing around or anything, as I'm wont to do from time to time. But this is not going to be like I was saying just a minute ago in the interview, this isn't going to be the last time we speak with Libre. We're going to speak to him as much as possible, whenever it's possible for him. Always, making sure that he needs to put safety first, safety of the people he's with first, that kind of thing. But he'll be able to give us updates as they happen, possibly in, short bursts of video calls between him and me, or whoever we have available at the time. Yeah, so with that, we'll go out the same way we always do with the international. Everybody have a great night. God bless.
Stand up, all victims of oppression, for the tyrants fear your might. Don't cling so hard to your possessions, for you have nothing if you have no right. Let racist ignorance be ended, for respect makes the empires fall. Freedom is merely privilege extended, unless enjoyed by one and all. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The international ideal unites the human race. Let no one build walls to divide us, walls of hatred nor walls of stone. Come greet the dawn and stand beside us. We'll live together or we'll die alone. In a world poisoned by exploitation, those who have taken, now they must give. And end the vanity of nations, we've but one earth on which to live. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in the song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. and shield. When we fight, provoked by their aggression, let us be inspired by life and love. For though they offer us concessions, change will not come from above. So come, brothers and sisters, for the struggle carries on. The International unites the world in a song. So comrades, come rally, for this is the time and place. The International ideal